Let us now go on to the next stage, a round table with our 4 speakers today and a guest. Mr. Joaquin Toro, who is the Regional Coordinator of Risk Management for Natural Disasters for Latin America and the Caribbean, and he is working for the World Bank. We are going to be talking about next steps to implement a national strategy to increase resilience and sustainability. Next steps. And which are the first steps? The order of those steps. Advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons for the future activities. I want to thank everyone for participating in this roundtable. Let me introduce the subject matter, looking at today's data, concerns posed in your presentations, Dr. Mario Ordaz, Dr. Ayala, and also our friend from Canada, John Scherstovikov. Yes, yes. What are the steps we have? The next steps. You have said something about the need of having the right data for decisions to be made. Many of you have said it is quite necessary to decide and invest on the quality of data for them to be real data and reliable data. For the World Bank, also for everyone, which are the next steps? For us to look into this in our cities, how can we have first-hand information? Would anyone like to start commenting on the important need of having well-informed data? Yes. Joaquin, please go ahead. Welcome. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to talk to you today. All the presentations are fantastic. I apologize for Fernando. Yes, yes, yes. I am going to try to give you the space that he left because he wasn't able to continue with us. So I'm taking Fernando's place. Let's see. We've heard so many proposals. And we see there is a lot of information. The first step is political decision. What is it that we want to do? Also, a technical decision is important. And that would be of great help. If we have those two things, 80 or 90% will have been addressed. We know what we have to do. We know where we have to do it. So where do we start doing it? I think this is an important item. We are seeing today that natural disasters will continue. We do not know when, but they are always there. The first step, I think, to clearly understand the information we have. Data and information are important. What information we do not have that we still have to get? To have the prioritization analysis. How do we prioritize? This has been mentioned. Our friend from British Columbia has said, the decision is there. We have to invest resources and we have to get more resources to complete the program. I think today we are very close to having that program. We have to structure the program a little bit more, look into the gaps it has, and I think that everything we have seen in these 3 days, it's on those lines. Just a little bit pushing would be great for us to continue. Thank you so much. Dr. Del Toro, doctor from Colombia, would you like to take the floor, please? You have the floor. Oh, well, it was another doctor, I'm sorry. Yes, I think it is quite clear we have to have data that are sometimes not only for schools, data for other environments. I think all these methods may guarantee resilience in the face of disasters of school facilities, for instance, in a very particular manner. We should be using those data we already have. It's important for us to look into this in our own environments. Historically, we use those data for information. Sometimes we look for information, we do not find it. I believe everything we can do at the academic research levels has to do with turning this into a reality through our methods and formulation. And this really depends on data, the data we have available and how we use those data. This is what I could say about what is happening in Mexico. Yes, thank you so much. And how can we structure questions being asked? How can we make sure we have efficient investments, resilient investments for schools? In some places, schools are over 50 years of age. So how can we make sure we get resources like coming from the World Bank for these policies of resilient efficiency in our schools? Is there a methodology? Is there a way we can do this? Dr. John from Canada, it is your turn. Would you like to comment on this, please?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the experience here was that, starting in 1990, there was a lot of interest to upgrade our schools, but it was very haphazard, and there wasn't a champion at the government level to make it happen efficiently and well. What happened between 1990 and 2015, there was a groundswell from the community, from the parents, from the teachers, and it was really their initiative that, speaking to government, almost demanding that schools that house our future, our children, that are our future, to upgrade these high-risk schools. And then the government, the Ministry of Education, as the champion, took the lead and got approval from the government of BC to set aside so many dollars per year to prepare that program and implement the program. So it took initiative from the community that really wanted this desire. It took a champion from within the government to say we need to allocate some money out of our provincial budget for schools to reduce the life safety risk for our vulnerable children. And then, there's the discussion of data. And once these guidelines were started, as I mentioned, the first step was to assess every building in British Columbia, to get that data, to put them in a bin of high-risk school buildings that needed to be upgraded. So that's sort of the way things evolved here. And once the champion at government was there, once some money was there, and once the data was there, then it was just the details of implementing it in a consistent manner. And so, again, British Columbia, we're not as large as some of the countries that are being spoken about here. We have 1,600 schools and about maybe 16,000 individual buildings compared to the larger amount that have been spoken about. And about 1/3 of those were deemed to be high risk. So, it's a manageable size, and it's still taken 15 years to get halfway through. And I think the goal is that we believe in the next 10 years that will be done, and every child will be housed in life-safe school buildings. So that's a little bit of the background here.
Gracias, Dr. John.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. John. Dr. Mario Ordaz, would you like to comment on this question, please?
Doctor Mario, su micrófono.
Yes, please.
Perdón, siempre con el problema de los datos.
Yes, in terms of data,
Me parece que
I think
una de las cosas a las que se refería el maestro Fernando Ramírez en su presentación,
that what we have heard in the different presentations vis-a-vis other countries, a lot of those things are related to data, to information. I think there are so many ways we can enhance and improve the information we already have. No more than 10 years ago, we had a very big project in the federal structure in Mexico, and we created a database. This was done by the Engineering Institute, and we had financing for this, including a lot of the things, federal infrastructure, and of course, all the schools we had in 2010 here in Mexico.
For sure, it's not all, but it was 150,000. So if it wasn't all of them, it was many of them. And many of that data was analyzed by the Engineering Institute, classified. The schools were classified in a few hundred examples of structural types. And so a lot of data analysis was done for each type, and we calculated risk curves like the ones that I presented, which have been used ever since. Fonden has used them. It's no longer clear whether it's Fonden that's using them, but the Fonden has been using them to take decisions on risk mitigation. So I'm certain that this is crucial. We for sure can do something better, but we do have a fairly certain idea of where the schools are right now, what the materials are, what their status is. And with moderate resources, we could complement those databases and very quickly update that data. A very interesting thing is that this effort that was done at Fonden was not a survey effort. We didn't go to survey these 150,000 schools. The information was already existing. It was a bit scattered around here and there in some institutions, including at INIFED. And it was just a matter of a good muscled government body to demand that demanded all the other institutions to share that data. It was the Secretariat of Finance that did this, applied the golden rule. What's the golden rule? Whoever has the gold sets the rules. And they basically said to all their institutions, give me your data. And yeah, I don't think that we're in a perfect situation, but we have a lot of information that we can start using now. Thank you, Doctor. It has also caught our audience attention. The scales that you mentioned, this issue that is long-term, should we focus on prevention towards models that allow us to have data that allow us to prevent? I mean, you've showed this in your lectures. We need to bet on prevention. So people are asking, how can we analyze the issue of scales in territories and areas that are diverse? There are, for example, in the British Columbia, efforts can be more focused than in other areas in which there's different terrain. So how can we have a risk mitigation methodology in these type of different terrains? Professor Joaquin Toro, any comment? Yes, of course, Gabriela. Thank you very much for this question because I think it ties in with the previous one. What I would like to say in this sense is that, as Mario mentioned, the information is there. As Gustavo mentioned, there is lack of information as well. As we were mentioning, we have the necessary information to start. As Fernando mentioned, we're not starting from scratch in Mexico. So I think we need to systematize what we have. We need to know what we have in the country at the federal level, at the state level, and at the municipal level. Because schools have different administrators, we have federal schools, we have state schools and municipal schools. And to do a comprehensive program, we need to integrate these three administrative lines and to have clear and defined methodology that is technically strong, as mentioned by Dr. Dr. Serstobitov. We need to do this because it will be a program that will take years, if not decades. In Mexico, to give you a specific example, we have areas where we have liquefaction areas, we have structures that are super ancient, we have areas that are more modern but riskier than the old ones. So there's a variety of typologies of education infrastructure, houses even that have been adapted into becoming schools. However, there is a lot of information about the behavior of each one of these structures, as Mario mentioned. In developing countries, we can't have the shaking tables that John mentioned, maybe, but there's still a lot that has been done in countries like Mexico, a lot that could allow us to take risk decisions. So I think that the issue is to have a system that lasts throughout time. Unfortunately, the resources are limited and we need to start prioritizing, as Mario mentioned. How does that prioritization look like? Well, using the methodologies that can help us kickstart a program. Thank you, Professor Del Toro. People are also asking something related to the fact that you have been commenting a very important tool, the Risk Atlas. developed by city governments. So people are asking about how many resources, Dr. Gustavo Ayala, are destined, and what type of resources are destined for new construction or restoration in cities. Is there a methodology? Do we need a database? Do we need to establish channels with local governments to know about these resources and address them towards prevention?
Bueno, ciertamente para las actividades a las que yo me dedico, pues no necesariamente tenemos abundancia de recursos. Creo
In
que
the work that I do, we don't have a lot of resources,
somos muchos con
abundant
muchos problemas
resources.
para muy poco dinero.
We have a lot of problems for such little money. In the context of our institute, we have the possibility of doing this type of work and developments that can benefit the evaluation and design of our schools, thanks to our own financing provided to us by the university. And this continues to be a serious problem in Mexico. Hopefully, we will have a different situation that will afford us the resources so we can materialize these improvements that remain in paper and studies and academics that are never really put into practice in structural engineering to benefit safety and the well-being of our schools and their users. That's, I think, what I can say about it. Thank you, Dr. Gustavo Ayala. In your presentations, you talked about future losses, how we can estimate the future losses in an event, in an urban setting. Dr. Mario Ordaz, people are asking how we can estimate these future losses costs right now in a city like Mexico City, a country in a country that is subject to constant earthquakes and social cultural changes. Is there any way to estimate this right now, taking into consideration the political environment that we have? Is there a methodology to do so? Yes, of course. The methods to estimate future losses began around the 80s. So we're about to have 40 years of these methodologies, and the model for future losses in Mexico was implemented in 1993. We didn't arrive late to the party. We have around 30 years of experience using these models. And the main user of these models has been the insurance industry, both in the public and private sectors. The national securities and insurance commissions uses these models to manage the insurance industry in Mexico, and there hasn't been a lot of public interest in these methods, with the exception of government officials at Fonden who were interested in this topic. There is a model developed that Fonden in theory continues to use. So the Mexican government has a public instrument, a technical instrument that allows it to do these estimations. The estimations can be done in different ways to estimate the losses that would be caused in defined events. For example, the losses in Acapulco, if we had an 8.4 earthquake just below Acapulco, we can do that. The models are prepared to do that. And they're also prepared to issue curves like the ones that I showed, which are a bit more technical, that show the probability or the frequency in which different loss patterns can happen in the future. So technically, we are well prepared. The private sector uses these models constantly to take decisions. The public sector has also used these models with different intensity. The technology exists. Maybe the information is not entirely updated, but we do have the methodology to do these estimations. Thank you, doctor.
Creo que maestro Joaquín Toro, quería usted comentar algo al respecto.
Professor Joaquín Toro, did you want to share something about this? No, but I would just simply like to say that these things complement each other. What Mario mentioned about future losses and what we can do today. As he said, the importance of having strategies allow us to have these programs to reduce risk in education infrastructure. That's very clear. And on the other hand, how can we ensure that we will have the necessary resources to answer to a disaster that can happen tomorrow in a systematized way? So it's very important to have a holistic view of what we need to do. We know that there's a pressing risk that we need to reduce. That's the snapshot that we have today of our existing education infrastructure. And also what you mentioned, Gabriela, how can we avoid risky construction related to what John mentioned in his latest publication and the latest publication of the guidelines for construction, and also to enforce these construction codes, but also how to respond to disasters, because they're going to come tomorrow or in 5 years or in 10 years efficiently, not just from the physical part, but from the financial part as well. And as Mario mentioned several times, there are several instruments, but something that I would like to verify is that insurances have not saved the life of anyone. And this is important. We can't say, let's have financing strategies or insurance strategies for schools without intervening and reducing the risk that we have today, because that's the only way we can save lives. So these two things need to go hand in hand, both at the federal level, at the state level, at the municipal level. Thank you. Indeed, the important thing about these roundtables and discussions is to understand an issue from all sides. Our audience was also interested in, well, Dr. Sherstavitov wanted to share something, I think, and people are asking about the construction codes from British Columbia. Can you complement this a bit more?
Thank you. Is it possible just to share my screen briefly?
Por favor, adelante.
Go ahead, of course.
Okay. I just, there was discussion about planning, and in Canada, this government agency, NRCan, does earthquake planning scenarios for provinces or for cities to help them just to convey the message to the public and to assist them in planning. And you can see this right now for the megathrust earthquake in BC, the number of estimated buildings to being destroyed, fatalities, the impact on the economy, and the number of people displaced where temporary housing would be necessary. So this is a tool. It's just an information tool. But in British Columbia, as I mentioned, the government now is moving towards an existing buildings code to try and improve this. So every building that is upgraded, this number will come down, and this number will come down, and this number will come down, and this number will come down. We're also looking at the national level, we're looking to enhance our building code to improve the performance of new buildings from just a life safety performance to a level that we can have no repairs required for a certain level. So that in our National Building Code 2020, for hospitals, we'll have them to be undamaged for a 1 in 1,000 level earthquake, and for schools to be undamaged in a 1 in 475. So we're trying to raise the bar for performance of new buildings so that a new building is not going to cause anyone to be displaced, reduce the impact. So I think these, people are talking about scenarios, and I think the public can understand this. They understand there's a large earthquake that can happen, and they understand that the programs will just start moving and reducing all these numbers. So again, everyone understands these numbers are not precise. These are estimates, but as a tool for provinces and cities to help them move into a plan, we have found these to be quite effective.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. John.
Thank you very much, Dr. John. Indeed, people were asking about this.
Al tema de plusvalías, pero bueno, también nos preguntan de sus charlas.
People were also asking about how to introduce new concepts about the use of new materials, sustainable materials, changes that are necessary right now in a society that is focused on addressing the pandemic, which is something that in the future will be considered in the resilience that schools must have. Will this change the focus? Will this make cost higher? Do we need to stop? Is this an opportunity for our architects and engineers and schools to become more sustainable and prepare in regards to these pandemics? Who would like to talk about this? Maybe Professor Joaquín Toro.
Gracias, Gabriela.
Thank you, Gabriela. I think that it's very important to understand why we do all these things. In the end, I think that what we are looking for is to provide the best possible education in a safe place to the population. If that is the greater purpose, to have safe infrastructure is only a part of all that. Today, we can see very clearly that pandemics is something that needs to be considered as part of the strategy.
no es algo nuevo, ¿no?
And
O
I
sea,
think that this
el
is
tema
not new.
de poder utilizar un reforzamiento
Being
estructural, por
able to
ejemplo,
use structural
como una excusa de poder
reinforcement
integrar
as an
otros
excuse
aspectos.
to
El caso
incorporate
de
other
Brasil, que lo
things,
presentó Karina y Fernando
as
también,
Karina
se
mentioned,
unieron
in
al tema
Kyrgyzstan, for
de
example.
una energía más eficiente
For example, energy
se mejoró la
efficiency
calidad, digamos, de la
or
educación, porque los chicos
improving
en las
in
escuelas
the
estaban
end the quality of
bien,
education,
¿no? Es
because
decir, estaban cómodos, estaban en esa
children
situación de
in
poder
school
aprender.
were
Y en ese
warmer
sentido
or
creo
were
que
ready to learn
obviamente
or
va
in
a
a better
necesitar
condition to
algunas
learn. Obviously,
acciones técnicas para saber qué es lo que se debe, cómo se
technical
debe hacer,
actions
acciones
will have to be
funcionales,
taken
digamos,
to
al
understand what needs
respecto
to be done or
de
not,
cómo incorporar
functional
este nuevo tipo
actions to
de cosas
determine
que en
how
algún
we
momento
can
ya
implement these
existían, pero
sort
hay
of
que
things that
hacer
might
las
already
valer, ¿no? Es
exist, but
decir,
of
por
course we need to include.
ejemplo, simple
I don't
ejemplos,
know, a simple
baños para
example
niños
might
de
be
primero o segundo grado,
bathroom facilities
donde lavamanos
for
está acá arriba, ¿no?
children
Esto no tiene
in
sentido,
the
¿no?
first or second degree where
Eso
the
sí se
sinks
puede
are too
mejorar.
high. That makes no sense.
Y creo
We can
que
improve
lo
that.
importante, digamos, un poco
And I
recalcar
think that what
esta
it's important
iniciativa de escuelas seguras.
is
La
to
base
stress
de
this
todo esto
initiative.
no es solamente la infraestructura,
The
pero
base
sino
of
es
all this is
cuál es
not
la
just infrastructure,
estrategia
but
por atrás de
what's
la
the
Secretaría de Educación en
back
este caso, por
strategy
ejemplo, de poder
from
brindar,
the Secretary of
digamos,
Education, for example, to
esta
provide
educación a diferente, la calidad de educación, a
education
eso voy,
and the
¿no?
quality of
¿Cuál es esa
education
estrategia?
to
Entonces creo
society?
que a
What's
partir de
that
ahí
strategy?
podemos
And from that,
físicamente tener
we can
intervenciones que nos permitan, por un
physically
lado, mejorar
intervene
la seguridad, pero
to
también la
improve safety on
funcionalidad
the
de la
one
escuela.
hand,
No
but also
podemos
the
hacer una cosa
functionality
ahora,
on the other.
esperar que venga alguien
We
que diga, no,
can't do
tenemos que hacer lo
something
otro.
now
Eso va a ser
and
mucho
then
más
have
caro
someone
en vez de
else
tener
come and say, no, let's do these some other things. That would be more
acciones integrales.
expensive than doing comprehensive
Muchísimas
actions.
gracias, doctor
Thank you very
Toro.
much,
Doctor Gustavo
Professor
Ayala, ¿algún
Toro.
comentario respecto a
Dr. Gustavo
pandemia,
Ayala,
protección
do you
civil?
have any
Ahora,
comments about the
como bien dicen,
pandemic and civil
tenemos que atender
protection?
todo. Los recursos son
As
los
is
mismos,
being
muy
mentioned, we
limitados.
need to
¿Qué
cover everything,
opinión
but the
tiene usted?
resources are limited.
Bueno,
So what's your
ciertamente yo
opinion?
creo que como meta,
Well,
ideal
indeed, the
en nuestro
ideal
trabajo
goal
es
in our
básicamente
job
buscar a través de nuestras
is
recomendaciones de diseño, a través de nuestros métodos, la
to
posibilidad de que
look
poder contar
for
con
the
una
possibility of
infraestructura que
having
particularmente yo considero crítica,
infrastructure
escolar, que bajo
that is
situaciones
critical, school
de desastre
infrastructure
como las ocasionadas por un sismo, nos lleve a estados de
that
desempeño de ocupación inmediata.
has
No
immediate
es
performance and
aceptable
occupancy
moralmente, socialmente, económicamente,
with our work and with
que
our
las
methodologies. It is
estructuras se dañen.
unacceptable
El
for these
impacto
structures to
no es
become
solo que los
damaged
niños dejen de tomar
because the impact
clases,
is not
el
just
impacto es
children
el
not taking
cambio
classes. The impact is
en la estructura
also
social
the change
y de
in
trabajo
social
que ocasiona
structure
el hecho de que los
and
niños y los jóvenes no puedan
labor,
asistir a las escuelas y
which
formarse en
is
ese
derived
sentido.
from
Yo creo
children
que
not being able to attend
la llamada de
school.
atención
So I think that
a nuestros diseñadores, a
the
nuestras
wake-up call for
autoridades
our designers and
dedicadas a la normatividad
authorities
es ver los caminos
in
bajo los
charge
cuales
of
podemos
this
llegar a condiciones
is
de diseño
to
que
find
garanticen
the
las ocupaciones
ways to
inmediatas.
get to
Se ha demostrado que
designs
el
that
diferencial en
allow
costo por
immediate
tener una
occupancy.
estructura
It
más
has been
segura
estimated
es
that
mínimo o hasta
having
menor
safer
si
structures
tomamos en
incurring lesser
consideración el
costs
costo
if we take into
social,
consideration
el
the
impacto a las
social cause, the
comunidades.
impact
Eso
to communities.
reflejado en pesos y centavos probablemente es difícil,
In
pero ciertamente tiene un
pesos and
valor y un valor
cents,
muy
it's
importante
difficult
en la
to
configuración
translate that
de
into
esa
money, but
utilidad que
it
puede
must be
tener una
important
estructura
taking into
o un
consideration
sistema como es un edificio
the
escolar.
use of such buildings like school buildings. Thank you very much, Dr. Gustavo. Dr. Mario Ordaz, people are also asking about civil protection and more sustainable schools, schools protected against pandemics. And do you think that this is something that we need to address as well? As Dr. Gustavo mentioned, we need to modify standards, and the world is going through a quite critical moment. And what do you think about that?
Sobre el asunto de la situación en pandemia.
About the pandemic.
No he pensado mucho.
Frankly, I haven't thought about that a lot. There are things that we need to be aware of course. If we don't have hospitals like the ones described by Dr. Gustavo, who are capable of having immediate occupancy after earthquakes of a certain size, of course, there's always going to be a big enough earthquake that could destroy them. But if we don't have these sort of hospitals and we have an earthquake tomorrow, we're going to have to evacuate them and all the patients, highly contagious patients, and that can be a nightmare for the civil protection authorities that has never been thought of. And it could be dire. And we haven't done this because it hasn't been the interest of the current authorities, although we have the tools. We have the technology to do these estimations. Maybe what is missing is the interest and or the money. And another thing that I think should be taken into consideration, I mean, we don't have, we have a lot of, tools and we need to apply them. One of these tools is standards. I don't think that we have bad standards in Mexico. We have old standards, but I don't think they're necessarily bad. What we have is a very deficient system to withhold these standards. So this is an issue of risk reduction and civil protection that needs organization. This is in the hand of the governments, and for some reason or other, it hasn't been done. And that has caused these standards to not be applied and to have buildings that don't follow these standards. So that is a task that is additional and an additional effort for the government to respect these standards. And the other thing that I hope is clear is the decision of how much to invest and how to invest and how to do these reinforcings. That's very technical. There are many things at play. And I don't think these are activities that call for just the allocation of money to schools for them to figure it out. No, this needs to be planned very carefully to not misspend the money. And I think that after today, it is clear that we need to put all the science as we can and all the tools as we can. Quick solutions, short-term solutions will take us to misusing those funds. Thank you very much, Doctor. As Professor Toro mentioned, the ultimate goal is for us to have quality-based education and safety, which is something that we will have to have in future years. Something else that the audience talked about was whether we need to contact universities more. As you mentioned, this is very technical. Are we preparing future generations for them to be the new designers, the future reviewers that will be in charge of resilience in the future? I mean, maybe we should have a subject in universities called resilience. As Dr. Barron mentioned yesterday, just as we evaluate constructions, any type of construction in the city, we should be able to focus on schools to generate a larger amount of specialists that could address these issues more quickly. Do you think we should have a specialty focused on this? Who would like to share something about that? Professor del Toro? Yes, we have to have this specialty. There needs to be an investment in human resources. It's not just schools. We're talking about hospitals as well, and all of the infrastructure that we have in our cities. Obviously, there needs to be motivation to use those human resources. And Mexico is one of the countries that has these human resources. UNAM is a reference not just in Latin America, but for the whole world. Professionals like Dr. Alcocer, Mario, Gustavo, etc. are names that are internationally renowned. How can we move from academics into something real, into something that allows people to see theory become reality? To do that, I think it's important for governments to set programs into motion, like the ones that we're seeing in INIFED, in Turkey, for example, in Istanbul. We can see seismic engineers, modeling engineers, and seismic engineers that are putting all their learnings into reality. And walking the streets, you can see hospitals, schools, infrastructure with structural reinforcing activities, new structures, etc. So I think that that is something that we need to do as well. It's not just the need of having these capabilities, but also to use it and promote the use of these capabilities, to have a virtuous circle. There are many countries in Latin America who are not as fortunate as Mexico. Over there, we are looking for human resources, and at times we need to go outside of those countries to get the human resources to provide the services that are needed. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. John, what's the secret over there in Canada that allows you to produce more human resources in these matters? Can you share your experience? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that we have more human resources, but I like the discussion. You know, right now our code, our Canadian code for new building is objective based. The objective being life safety, and we use these importance factors to get a little less damage for different buildings. There's a huge movement to move towards a performance-based code. Right now, I'm sure in Canada, if the public believes that a new building designed by code is earthquake proof, because there's no messaging being given to them that that's not the fact. Life safety is much different than earthquake proof. So there's a large movement here to move towards a performance-based code, so that the resources, all the engineering students coming out, all the engineers, they have all the tools to do this analysis and design. And we want to find a way to convey to the public or a new owner that wants to build a new building that if they want the performance of undamaged or low damage for this level of earthquake, they can get it with some confidence based on a set of tools and design procedures that the community does consistently. Right now, it's a code and a perception by the public that I believe is perhaps not correct. So, I'm really looking forward over the next 5 to 10 years as we try to move towards a performance-based approach, not just for structural, but the elevators in a building, the mechanical air and ventilation systems in a building, that for a certain level of earthquake, the owner of that building understands how it's really going to perform for a given level of earthquake, and they can choose their performance over as long as it meets the minimum building code requirements. So that's the initiative we're starting on here in Canada. It's going to take time, but definitely all the engineering students and young engineers, they have all the skills to be able to do this. We need that policy. I know in Canada we need that national or provincial policy to be able to implement that and make it tangible to the public.
Muchísimas gracias, doctor. Tenemos varios temas que se nos quedaron en el tintero.
Thank you, doctor. We have many other. Thank you. Yes, thank you, doctor. We have many other issues here. We will do a summary and it will be sent to you. There are many questions. These last minutes of this roundtable, I would like to ask you your final remarks. A couple of minutes. Dr. Joaquín Toro, please. I simply want to thank you, Gabriela, for giving me the opportunity to be in this panel with such knowledgeable people, the people who've studied this for such a long time. And let me highlight a couple of things. One, technical knowledge exists. Information to start making decisions exists. And I think that what we should move forward on is political decision to have a federal program, a state municipal program. In this sense, INIFED and SEP, we are on the right path, and the Education Ministry of Mexico on the right track as well. I think Dr. Lucy Jones of the California Center always says people are concerned about the when, not the what. The when, we don't care about it. It could be tomorrow or 10 years' time. I think what really matters, and there's importance of having this type of panel this week of us talking about physical infrastructure in school facilities, is the what. What can we do to reduce risks, to avoid risks in the future, and make disaster response more efficient. I think that's what we should be doing. And thank you once more. Yes, Dr. Ayala, just a minute for your final remarks. Certainly, yes, thank you. I want to emphasize that what really damages and kills is not the earthquakes, it's the buildings. We know in our environment, a research environment, it is possible for us to have safe constructions, resilient constructions. The problem is and will always continue being, how is it that we can communicate to everyone in our profession all the knowledge we have, all the knowledge that is out there. On the other hand, how can we convince everyone that they are like a resin oil? It has such a bad taste when you drink it, but after a while, you're going to feel so good when you see results of your work, like having resin oil. Well, I think it's a matter of not continuing with so many courses within the university sphere, but to give the baton to other professional associations that are directly communicating with everyone involved in problems themselves, for them to convey this knowledge, particularly to convey the risk of decisions made on the design of their facilities. I believe that's what I wanted to say on this. Thank you so much, Dr. Gustavo. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you so much, Doctor. Yes, Dr. John, please, you have the floor. Final remarks, please, Doctor.
No, thank you. And yeah, no, thanks so much. Great discussions today. And what we found from this program, as I had mentioned, it was never about trying to be perfect or be technically perfect. It was about setting a standard, making it consistent. The decisions are made on a consistent set of data, on a consistent approach. And we know that doing these upgrades will save lives of the people that use the schools. And to make that program simple, consistent, and again, reviewable by this technical review panel, I think really gave confidence, to the school districts, the parents, that this was being implemented quickly, efficiently, and consistently, and we found that had a lot of value. Thank you.
Gracias, doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. Finally, Dr. Mario, please, Mario Ordaz, you have the floor, sir. Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Gabriela, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone, Dr. Sergio Alcocer, for this kind invitation. My final remark or reflection would be that living in a city or a country submitted to natural disasters that may result in catastrophes, well, it's not good, but it's inevitable. We can not avoid it, inevitable. And most of the countries, as we know, have this problem in one way or the other. We aren't the only country suffering natural disasters. We know that. This is not something we cannot remedy. This is not a tragedy we cannot remedy. To start with, in many countries of the world, we have very many success stories and very successful examples of how they're facing natural disasters. We have the case of British Columbia that we heard about. This is very interesting. The Peruvian case, we heard about it in this workshop, and we have also the Japanese experience, how they've been able to reduce impressively reduce the loss of material and human lives during an earthquake. And this has happened in about 100 years. And that's something that we have to look into. This is not something we cannot remedy. We need two things. We need techniques. I think that in this aspect in Mexico, we're not doing so bad after all. I mean, perhaps not in the sufficient amounts of the techniques, but we do have human resources that are quite competent and skilled that can do this task. And above all, I think the other ingredient is organization. That is, we need technical efforts, as we have seen in the case of other countries, British Columbia, case in point as well. We need those countries, those efforts rather, to be organized generally by the government. Generally, the government has to be the center of this organizational process. It has to be quite disciplined and quite committed and engaged for us to be able to implement those projects. Yes. Yes. This is not a spontaneous generation. The government has to champion this. And I think that in terms of civil protection and defense against catastrophes, there are pending tasks on the side of the government. I think the government is to a certain degree indebted. I think the government should be championing this, and that's the end of my reflection. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ordaz. Your comments are very interesting. I want to thank everyone in this panel for your excellent participation in this roundtable. Quite an interesting roundtable we have had. We are finishing on time, and thank you everyone for your time, for participating with us.